right, today I am joined by Hunter Sones, a competitive enablement consultant here at Klue, a recurring guest at Klue, and also, not to put any pressure on you, Hunter, but producer Grayson in the background right before recording let me know, unbeknownst to me, that this is our 100th episode of the Competitive Enablement Show. So, Hunter, thank you so much for joining me, and how much pressure do you feel right now?
Well, I feel a lot more pressure now knowing that this is episode 100, but hopefully we can make this a good one.
I got a feeling it's going to be a good one because you do a lot of competitive enablement work over at Klue, and you've been up to a couple of things behind the scenes, and that's what we're going to talk about today. Is you've been working on battlecard content for Klue, and you took on a little experiment. Do you want to share with the audience what you've been working on?
Sure. So for a little bit of context for whoever's listening to this, so I'm a competitive enablement consultant at Klue. I basically work with a lot of our top customers and figure out, how can they improve their competitive enablement programs? So there's a whole bunch of different things that go into that. How can we conduct better competitive research? How do we improve crowdsourcing? How do we improve competitive content? That's a huge one. So one of the special projects that I wanted to take on was actually supporting our competitive enablement manager at Klue, Brandon, on conducting competitive research for our win-loss space. So what I wanted to experiment with as part of this was how could, essentially, what would the difference be in quality between a battle card built out for our top competitor in the win-loss space using ChatGPT versus Klue? And so it was a very, very exciting sort of like special project to work on. And ultimately, the way that we got to test this in terms of the quality of the output was we put the ChatGPT generated battle card in front of our sellers, and we put the real battle card in front of our sellers, and we got some feedback from both. So that's essentially how the experiment was set up.
So for this episode, you're going to share a little bit behind building this battle card with ChatGPT and the kind of just compare and contrast the differences between using ChatGPT, using Klue, limitations, what was good, what was unsuccessful. But my first question here is, okay, you build a battle card in GPT, you build one in Klue, you share it with your sellers, the most important stakeholders for battle card content. What were their instant reactions?
I'm not going to lie, I got a couple chuckles from the ChatGPT battle card. I remember actually writing down a few of the quotes that the sellers had when I showed it to them. One of them literally just said, "Was this created by ChatGPT?" Which I thought was hilarious. They kind of called me out on that one. Another quote was like, "Why does it say robust everywhere?" Which I thought was really funny.
Who was that from?
That was from Peter, someone on our account executive team. So I thought that was hilarious. But the most important one to me, actually, that was actually really good feedback, was the account executive had said, this looks like really interesting information. I just don't know what to do with it. And actually, now that I take a second look, it's not really that accurate. So that was interesting feedback. Because going into this experiment, I was genuinely curious, would this information that's generated by ChatGPT actually resonate with a seller? And to know that at sort of a second glance from a seller, they weren't really sure what to do with it and they weren't really ready to trust it. That was interesting for me to know that, the insights generated by Klue might actually be more impactful and more trustworthy.
So there's a couple of things I want to get into here, and there's two sides of things. Like one, the output of the content for a seller, because the reason you make this is for a seller to use, but also sort of maybe the processes for you kind of embodying what we call Klue curators, folks that are building this content, and some of the areas that it was like working with a ChatGPT and working with a Klue. My first question on this is, take me through how you started to build a battle card in ChatGPT, and what was the first red flag that you noticed while building?
So the process that I took for creating a battle card in ChatGPT was essentially, I had a prompt to create the our differentiators component of a battle card. So essentially, what are the things that we are good at that our competitor is not good at that a customer would care about? So I asked ChatGPT to create 4 different differentiators for me, create talk tracks that are associated with those differentiators, and also to give me some insight into why these differentiators would matter to a buyer. So basically following the Fact Impact Act framework that we talk about. Once I actually put these in, the insights that I got back were a bit lackluster. The first thing that I noticed is they were really, really high level. These differentiators they were things like better UX UI or better customer service. So I actually went back and I refined my prompt because I didn't want this to, I didn't want to set myself up for failure when I was trying to put together these prompts. I wanted to actually see if I could get a good output from ChatGPT. So I gave it a little bit more information. These are some of the things we know about our competitor. These are some of the things that we know our customers care about, but it still ended up being really high level. The challenge, I think, with ChatGPT in particular was that, one, I didn't want to give it a lot of proprietary information, right? There's certain security and privacy concerns that I had. I don't want to be putting that type of information into a public LLM. So I knew that some of the information that it was going to be pulling from the public web was going to be a little bit outdated. And that was true. In the end, the outputs that I ended up getting were like extremely outdated. It was essentially pulling from its database of information that was up to date prior to Klue actually making an acquisition that put us into the win-loss space. So when I was saying, hey, Klue versus our top competitor, it was still comparing Klue as just a competitive enablement platform. It didn't have a lot of context about how our win-loss offering would have compared to that top competitor. So those results ended up totally being, off.
Again, we talk about when we've talked about AI at large, and honestly, the same with like building content within Klue is like garbage in, garbage out. Like in that example there, if it's not picking up relevant context that we have acquired a win-loss, one of the leading win-loss companies, and we have a win-loss product, then how is it going to actually then set the table for a seller? Like you're already way behind the 8 ball. Are there other areas in terms of depth of insights that ChatGPT didn't pull, but then you noticed that Klue did pull?
Yeah. So reviews and win-loss insights. Those were the two big ones that Klue pulled that obviously an LLM that's, a public LLM is not going to be able to pull. And those are actually the most important pieces of information to me, because what I wanted to put together in our battle card, it's not just what are our differentiators. It's also what are the proof points that sellers can lean on to actually reinforce some of these differentiators. What's the evidence? So Klue was able to pull, these are all the different reviews that actually help back up this differentiator. And it was also able to go much more in depth because it was looking at win-loss interviews. So it could tell me specifically the people who had maybe even switched from our top competitor over to Klue, why did they do that? Those are insights that, of course, you're never going to get out of a public LLM.
One of the ways you kind of pull that then, because I think traditionally how folks have looked at win-loss, for example, you're saying you're putting win-loss findings, win-loss insights into a battle card. Traditionally, I think how folks have looked at win-loss is maybe a research product, something where you share maybe a big presentation out to your executive team. So it's interesting to me that you're talking about finding win-loss insights and then putting them into kind of, for lack of a better word, tactical, applicable content for sellers like a battle card.
Yeah, exactly. So being able to take something like, here's a customer who switched from a competitor over to us. Here's the general, industry or sub-industry that they're in. And these were the reasons that they switched. If you've got that, and then maybe even an anonymized quote, that can be huge for giving a seller context about how to speak to that differentiator. It sort of puts like a bit of a face to the name to a certain degree. Instead of just saying, here's our differentiator, here's why we're better. Now the sellers actually have, a bit more context. Like, we're better in this way, and actually this type of customer or this group of customers really prefers us for these different reasons. And here's a quote that I can share.
You mentioned as well using sort of review insights, one of Klue's Klue AI modules there. Did you try to pull reviews from working with ChatGPT as well? Like, what was the differences between pulling reviews from Klue and putting it into your battle card and doing it with ChatGPT?
So the thing about using Klue is because we have our review insights module, we can literally just, look through all of the reviews, like literally thousands of reviews for our competitors, discern themes, like all of that stuff. public LLMs, all of that's blocked off. So you can't pull reviews into public LLMs. You can maybe take a few key reviews and try and, copy and paste them in and look for some themes. But if you're trying to do that for thousands of reviews, you're going to be at a bit of a loss there. It's not really possible. So in terms of reviews, being able to pull those into LLMs, like I tried a few workarounds, but it didn't work in the end.
We've talked a lot about outputs. Obviously, that is arguably the most important thing, like accuracy, relevancy, usability of the outputs of the battle card and working with ChatGPT or Klue. I'm curious, as the person responsible for building with it, what can you kind of compare what the workflow was like for you working with Klue and working with ChatGPT to get to the end point of building a battle card?
Sure. So one of the first places that I started in Klue was the Review Insights module. Really just trying to understand at a high level, what are people's preferences, sort of what are our strengths and weaknesses against this competitor? That was sort of the jumping off point. From there, I started to look into some of the individual reviews that kind of led up to some of those like big strengths and weaknesses themes. So that's basically where I started in Klue, and then starting to then take some of our win-loss insights and figure out which ones match up to those strengths so that I can start to put together some of those proof points. So basically it was really starting off with, okay, what are our strengths and weaknesses based on reviews? What are the win-loss insights that help sort of back those up? After that, it was starting to put together things like the evidence, the proof points. Those could be, different reviews that maybe we would share with a prospect. It could be different anonymized quotes from our win-loss interviews that maybe we would reference to a prospect, those types of things. So that was basically the jumping off point and where we ended up going in terms of building out the Fact Impact Act framework using a combination of reviews and win-loss insights. Again, with public LLMs, when I was trying to do this in ChatGPT, my jumping off point was trying to create a really good prompt. And my prompt was, again, basically help me figure out what our strengths and weaknesses are against this competitor and help me format that into the Fact Impact Act framework. But again, the data sources were so limited with a public LLM that it was garbage in, garbage out, exactly as you described. It didn't really give me anything that was beyond those really high-level points. And those high-level points, as I mentioned before, they were pretty outdated because, again, the public LLM was pulling from data that was prior to the Klue acquisition.
I know, obviously, we're biased here. I'll put my hand up. I'm biased. I think building battle cards in Klue is a lot more effective, efficient, and accurate than the ChatGPT. But if we were to take our Klue hats off for a minute here, could you share maybe one reason why listeners should and shouldn't use ChatGPT to build their battle cards?
Okay, so it's such a good question. There are a few things, actually, to give the devil its due, that I would use ChatGPT for when I'm building out a battle card. So I guess to start with the things that I wouldn't use it for, I would not take a whole bunch of my internal proprietary information and put it into ChatGPT. Hopefully that's obvious about why you wouldn't do that. But basically, one of the big reasons, in case you don't know, is that if you put it into ChatGPT, that information is then going to be used to train ChatGPT, which means people might actually be able to prompt ChatGPT and get that information out of the LLM. So if you've got proprietary data, you don't want to be training ChatGPT's models with that data. So that's basically one of the big reasons that I wouldn't want to put that information in there. The second is that since I can't put information in there, I just know that there's really not going to be a lot of ways for me to verify or validate the information that comes out of ChatGPT. Like, it's probably going to be too high level. Even if it's not, even if it's kind of pointing me in the right direction, there's no way for me to actually validate that information is correct. So there's going to be this really big trust issue if I'm using ChatGPT. Now, the things I actually would use ChatGPT for is once I've used Klue to figure out what are our strengths and weaknesses, what are our why we win and why we lose reasons, I actually really love using ChatGPT to help me come up with talk tracks, to brainstorm different ways that we could actually communicate our differentiators. For example, if I'm trying to say like, we really excel at this, we really excel at this, we really excel at this, this is a weak area, we chose to go this product direction because of XYZ, I don't know how to make that really succinct and connect it into an eloquent story. So sometimes I'll take some of those points, of course, not sharing anything that's too proprietary, and I'll use ChatGPT to help me come up with a talk track that pulls all of these different elements together into a succinct story. And then that talk track can go into the battle card under the ACT section of the Fact Impact Act framework. So there are different ways of maybe taking the different components to create talk tracks. Another thing that I like using ChatGPT for is sometimes actually coming up with positioning. So an example of this would be I had identified one of our strengths that I wanted to include into a battle card. But that strength was, I sort of needed a few different options for figuring out how do I want to position this. So I had, I basically said, hey, ChatGPT, here's our strength. I want to look at it through this lens. Give me 5 different options for how we could basically position this strength relative to our competitor. And it gives me a few different options. In the end, I actually didn't use any of the options, but I took one of them, made a couple of my own personal edits, and then ran with it and put that into the battle card. So in terms of it being a brainstorming tool, it's incredibly effective for a lot of different reasons there.
That's interesting. So like that kind of helping with formatting, when we conducted our AI and competitive intelligence research report, where we surveyed a lot of folks in our Compete Network community, the Klue community, that was the number one use case right now in terms of working with AI, regardless if it's Klue or ChatGPT or any other LLM, was this support for formatting, content writing, brainstorming. And especially when there is so much information, so much potentially complex technical information that you really need to distill down. Again, when a seller's your audience, we've talked about this since the day that Klue was born. You need to simplify, actionability. My eyes roll back into the back of my head saying these. We've said it so many times now, but for a seller audience, that is critical. Also, folks, if you don't know what the Fact Impact Act framework is, Grayson, I'm pointing. If you're watching the video, I'm pointing down, but we'll put in the show notes. Hunty did an episode maybe even a year ago at this point, walking through what that battle card framework is. Super actionable. Highly recommend checking that episode out. Hunty sharing his knowledge that he works with customers to install this kind of framework over and over and over again, and it's the most effective way to build your battle cards. I know we've talked a lot about sort of the ChatGPT and Klue of it all here, but my last question to finish up, I believe this is some of the first, you've worked a lot with working with customers to improve their battle cards. This is one of your first ones building Klue-specific battle cards. Is there something you're most proud of throughout this process so far, kind of sinking your teeth into this meta, working with Klue on Klue?
Is there something I'm most proud of? I think...
Or something you enjoyed most? Anything?
I loved actually putting it in front of sellers in the end and getting their feedback. Like the thing about a battle card is never done. It's sort of like this ongoing work, but getting to that V1 and then getting it in front of sellers and getting positive feedback that wow, all of this research, this actually, it's landing. That was extremely, extremely positive and very special. It was my first time building a battle card that was, for basically owning the entire process of building a battle card that was actually going to go into production at Klue. So it was very special just being able to get that first version launched, have positive feedback, and know that it was going to be used in the field and be relatively effective.
Hunty, you're the man. I'm so glad that you joined me on the podcast today. And listeners, I think we might expect a little bit more Hunter. Let me know if you're a fan like me. I think we're going to get Hunter a little bit more involved here as someone that's sinking his teeth into working with Klue, on Klue, and still helping so many of our customers. He's got such a depth of insights and experience that, frankly, your host over here doesn't have. So I love getting this subject matter expertise. Hunter, thank you so much for joining me. Where can people reach you? Where can people find you? Where can they knock on your door?
LinkedIn, Hunter Soanes on LinkedIn. Feel free to hit me up. If you have any questions about Compete, if you want to talk about product marketing, if you want to talk about anything, just how your weekend was, hit me up on LinkedIn. That's where you can find me.
All right. Thanks, Hunter. And we'll catch everyone in 2 weeks. See ya.
1, two,